You good? There you go. All right, I will gavel this meeting to order with my umbrella. The January 25th, 2024 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission, 5 p.m. Rockbridge County Administrative Offices. All commissioners present, save Shannon Spencer. Next order of business is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes proposed, or do we have a motion to accept as presented? To accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, John, move your microphone a little closer to you there. So hear your dulcet tones. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, carries. Approval of the minutes from the January 11th meeting. Are there any additions, subtractions, corrections to these excellent and thorough minutes that help catch me up on what I missed?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, now we'll move right along to citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. We'll open up the floor to any citizens who would like to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda. And citizens' comments duly closed. And we will move along to our first order of new business, which is entry corridor 2024-01, an application by Chastity Bergstresser for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage at 637 B Waddell Street, tax map number 35-1-1, owned by H&C Rental Inc. And we'll open up with a staff report from Arnie.
Good evening to you all. Typically, we do not change the staff report except to give you a little bit of an update when there's a deferral from one meeting to the next. So in the last section of the staff report on page 11, there's a little history section down there, and it says that during your last meeting, you deferred your decision on the application until the applicant could clarify how she prefers to meet the overall window sign limitation of 6 square feet. I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding about 6 square feet, thinking that it might be 6 square feet per window, but it's actually 6 square feet total. And during your last meeting, you discussed whether or not how that could be met, and you preferred that the owner or the business owner actually make that decision. I did go over, measured the 2 windows, and found out that they would be over the allotment of 6 square feet, even if they removed just the raise or the starburst portion on the upper, because that was one of the potential solutions that you had considered. So there is an option, there are 2 options. Well, option A is to just remove one of the 2 window signs completely, and then the remaining one would be less than the 6 square feet and would therefore meet. The other option is sort of a combo thing where you take the raise off of one of the window signs to reduce its size. And then on the other window sign, you remove everything except for the words Lexington VA. And that's actually the option that the business owner prefers. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Arnie about this?
Could you go over the option the business owner prefers again, Arnie?
The second option, which is to modify both signs so that the total display area is therefore less than 6 square feet and meets code, is to remove the raise off of one. So the upper portion of the sign off of one of the 2, and on the other sign, remove everything. That means the raise and the words at the bottom, and the words at the bottom are tanning salon and the phone numbers, so that the only thing that would remain on the second sign would be Lexington VA. The thing that I forgot to ask the applicant is, if you remove the rays on the top part, how do you remove the rays within the sign itself? Because then there's just a few little miscellaneous streaks left. So I did not ask Chastity how the remaining rays that are within the words Lexington, if those can be separated out separately, if that's something that you prefer.
And did you talk about just having one sign rather than two, and the applicant wanted two signs? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Arnie? Then we'll invite Ms. Bergstresser if she would like to make an applicant, not required to. But if you're fine with what's been presented, you're good. Okay. All right. Then we'll see if there's any public comment on this. Open that up. And again, no one rushing to the fore. We'll close that and discussion and recommendation. What do folks think about this matter? Is there anything anyone wants to say or make a motion?
I'm fine with it. I'm not too concerned about if there is a little bit of raise in between, as long as it meets the overall area requirement. So I move to approve the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application EC-COA 2024-01 for projecting sign and window signage meeting zoning requirements to be located at 637B Waddell Street as proposed by the applicant.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion at this point, or are we all ready to move on to a vote? Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that will do it. So thank you very much. You're Ms. Bergstresser, I take it. Yes, good. Well, thank you for coming out and thanks very much. And that'll do it, right? All right. We will move to our next order of business, which is another entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness 2024-02, an application by Luis Montoya for a certificate of appropriateness for exterior improvements and signage at 531 East Nelson Street, tax map number 30-1-8, owned by 4M Properties LLC. And we'll start with our staff report.
The property is in the C2 zoning district and therefore in the entrance corridor. They're asking for a number of items that affect both the exterior of the building and also signage. So it is a remodel and it is a request to reface existing monument sign, reface the directional sign, and replace the street facing wall sign with a modern Wendy's signage. This is a rebranding to a more modern look. There's also an existing 6 square foot wall sign on the side of the building near the drive-through, and that is proposed to be removed. The exterior remodeling will include, at least generally speaking, removing the existing, they call it a sidecar. To me, it almost feels like a greenhouse type thing that's on the side, and I guess those are no longer in vogue, so that is being proposed to be removed in its entirety. That's on the north facade. They're constructing a new sidewalk leading up to the building's entrance, installing new corrugated metal panels on the street-facing facade, and painting the existing curved fascia on the north and south elevations in a trim and a color to match, installing a new LED accent light under the coping cap on the front part of the building, and replacing the exterior wall-mounted lighting fixtures. They were very generous in that they provided us with a narrative that outlines each of these with their application. So that was helpful for us to sort of parse out all the individual requirements or proposal. On the location map, you see it's one parcel that includes those 3 buildings, and Wendy's is just one of the tenants on that larger parcel. On the next page, we do have an existing photograph of the existing building, and then the proposal for the front facade. Perhaps to note there, that front facade is very square and blocky, but the 2 sides will still retain that curved coping on the roof detail. So that will remain on the left-hand and right-hand side as you go down the sides of the building, but it will be painted a color that will match the new front portion, which gets removed and is much more sort of square and blocky. And then, of course, additional signage. As with all of your applications, we provide you with the sign regulations, and I'm not going to go through those in detail unless you have questions about those individual signs. Then also on the bottom of page 3 of 4, or page 17 of your packet, there's the applicable entrance corridor regulations. And for this, I'm now flipping over to page 18. Those are your typical signage, architecture, and lighting requirements or design guidelines that you have for entrance corridor. For its worst, staff does find the proposed improvements meet the zoning criteria. Happy to answer any questions. And perhaps, if you don't mind flipping back through, on page 23 again is that narrative, which is incredibly helpful. The next page is a site plan, not a site plan, a site plan in the sense that everything that they're showing on the site for approval. So there is additional painting of those coolers and freezers in the bag, painting of the garbage corral area, some moving around of parking areas so that the handicap parking is more accessible to the ramp that leads to the side of the building, and then very detailed drawings of the proposals for the different facades. On page 27, it would be the new sign up front. The brick base stays as is. The actual frame of the sign stays as is. And it's what we call a refacing, where they just pop off the plastic panels and pop on new plastic panels in the new design. Same thing on the next page for the one directional sign that they have. That sign is actually bigger than we currently allow, but if you do a refacing, that's fine. They're not changing the size in any way. So the exit sign is a directional sign. So again, that's just something where they're popping off the panels and putting on new panels in the new colors and the new design. The next page, you see the sign that will go above the wall on the front facade. And the next page shows you some color renderings. And then what I really wanted to perhaps focus in, because I didn't catch this the first or second time going through the application because they didn't provide the 2 photographs, but they had a lighted coping listed on the design, and we asked them for a representation of that. And the 2 photographs you have there, and I'm going to maybe ask you to go to the last page. That shows you the coping along the top edge of the roof, and then it has some lighting that's downlit over that corrugated metal panel. This happens to be the side of a building. This lighting feature is only going to be on the front of our proposed Wendy's. So it's not going to go down the side, but this representation that they had just happens to show it down the side and not on the front. But in our case, it's only going to be that new facade portion that's, I mentioned earlier, that's square and blocky, not the coping that's got that curve to it. That'll stay the same. That down each side, it only gets painted. Happy to answer any questions.
So on the entrance, is the only lighting, is it more like the, just here, just the regular downlight, or?
But you're also going to have, I'm not sure what you're exactly, but you're also going to have that upper lighting that's going to wash down the wall. So the lighting up here,
Oh,
that's where you were pointing.
right. I thought you said that was only going to be on the front.
Right. Correct. Oh,
But
so
on the
you're
side where the
only
actual
on the sides?
entrance is, the entrance.
Correct.
Could be on the
If
side.
I remember correctly, on all of the other drawings that you have. Now, this is can lighting, if that's what you're pointing
Yeah,
to.
right.
They had some other wall mounted lights, but those wall mounted lights do have a dark sky compliant
Okay.
rating to them. So it's not going to be just the down lights that you see there, the cans and the soffit. They do have some other light fixtures that are attached to the side wall.
Okay, yeah, right. I saw that. Okay.
I am not really understanding the scope of what they're planning for the front. Is that whole front section getting taken off? The whole front section? Okay.
So
That-
what's the best way?
Yes, up until where that little door is, right? On this picture, that whole front section. is
Actually, I
getting
don't
removed.
even think it's that far back.
That's what
So
I
you see the
don't
photograph
understand.
on
Yeah.
page, so
Yeah.
all the roof right now has that little curve to
Mhm.
the roof. And then, even though this is going to be a little bit tedious, could I get you to look at page 30? That's the color renderings. So right before you get to the photographs of the lighting. And if you look at that first elevation at the top, so the south elevation,
Page 30. I don't, we don't,
This one,
that one?
Yeah, the one that Leslie has there.
Okay,
So the very top one, as an example, you're looking down the side of the building. So what you're seeing is the curved part, but only that very front part, which is a little bit more square and blocky. That is what's going to get ripped off and be replaced with the square and blocky look. And if you do the same thing for that north elevation, which is the middle one, so it's not coming back as far as I think you were pointing to.
okay. So that front section is staying on.
So does that help
Just
Ex-
curious, yeah.
show how far the square blocky portion is going to go down the sides, which isn't very far?
They addressed the drive-through. You know,
I don't believe anything is
Okay.
changing on the
Okay.
drive-through.
Is that
And the
on
applicant or the franchisee can confirm or deny that when they get a chance.
on the front view, that has a customer entry door there on the front and then another one on the south side, is that correct?
That's what's proposed. Are you asking me if that is,
Is that there
Existing?
now? No?
let's look at the photograph because I don't remember.
Mm-mm.
No, it does not appear to be an entry door on the front.
Oh, yeah,
So you see
okay.
that on page 16, the current photograph does not show on the front. And
right.
that's where they're proposing that new walkway as well, that sidewalk that was
Right.
mentioned.
Arnie, I know they're just refacing the freestanding sign, so we're not really, there's no big issue on it. But question, when we calculate sign area, we don't include the base, do we?
No, it's the display area
Okay.
of the commercial message. So I take one shape over top of whatever they're proposing, whatever is the most basic shape, and put it over top of the display area.
Okay.
So the base is not, now the base comes in obviously overall sign height, but not for sign display area.
Right. Thank you.
And I may point out, once we get into the entrance corridor, we're definitely going to be looking at sign design guidelines. Whether or not we get into other stuff is an aside, but I'm guessing that we may be increasing from 25 square feet to something else once we get a better understanding of what all the current sign sizes are along that corridor.
Okay, any other questions for Arnie? Okay, we would invite the applicant, Mr. Montoya, if you'd like to come forward and you're Jeff Logan, okay.
My
Okay.
wife and I are the owners of the restaurant.
Great, thank you. So could you state your name and your address for the record? For the
Yes,
minutes?
it's Jeffrey Logan, and it's 1738 Kings Mill Drive, Salem, Virginia.
Great, thanks. Go right, do you have a statement or are you just here in case anyone
I'm
has
just here to
questions?
answer any of your questions.
Okay,
Yeah, so are you pulling out, sorry, is this section of wall coming forward some to allow for the door?
yeah, you come on
right,
up if
right.
you wanna.
Are you just adding a door here or is this coming forward?
See this section right here?
Right,
Okay, this is what's being removed.
right.
So there's gonna be a door on both sides of this.
Okay, so not right on the front of the,
No.
okay, so the
We will
door
have
stays.
two entrance doors, and this is the vestibule.
Yeah.
There'll be an entrance door on each side.
Right,
And then the ADA entrance will be the new doors.
okay.
Because really, we're just reverting to what it originally.
I was gonna
was.
say, it looks like that's how it was originally
Yeah,
built,
We're
right?
going
Yeah.
back to the original outside wall.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to pick that up.
It is hard to pick that up there, yeah, right.
we just don't need
That's set
that,
back.
we
yeah.
don't need that addition anymore.
Okay.
So,
Any further questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.
I have
I'm
one.
sorry, John.
Sorry,
Yeah,
just an observation. When I went to just do a walk around with the drawings, the fence that's surrounding the dumpsters,
that'll be repaired and repainted.
that's the part I was hoping you'd say.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
part of, yeah, Wendy's won't let us get away without.
All right, thank
They're-
you.
They're not easy. Okay, so any other questions?
okay, good, thank you. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Open it up for public comment. And seeing none, we'll close it. And see what discussion we might have and if there is a motion for recommendation.
I think looks good. I'm glad it's getting a refresh. It'll look very nice. Yeah.
It's nice, yeah.
So with that, I move to approve entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application ECCOA 2024-02 for the exterior remodeling and signage for the building located at 531 East Nelson Street as proposed by the applicant.
I second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we call a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that carries, and very good luck with it, and we'll look forward to seeing the new and improved Wendy's. Thanks. You're welcome. So we'll move on to our third order of new business, which is zoning amendments 2024-01, which is annual zoning ordinance amendments batch A. And we thought, bless you, that if we give until, say, 6:15 for consideration of as many as we can handle, that and then that'll leave us a little time for the other business and reports. Okay, good. So we will start. Arnie, what do you want to take us through? What do you hope to accomplish with us tonight?
Before I start yammering on about details, do y'all have any questions? Any observations or anything before I get going about what was done last time or what process we're in? We're still trying to put our things into 3 different baskets. One is basket A, which we're going to advertise it for a public hearing. It's the thing that's not going to take a whole lot of extra discussion on our part to get it ready for ordinance language to be advertised. Basket B is the basket that's going to take more time. And the best example there is cottage housing. We know that we're going to have to go through that in some detail. And then basket C is no, we don't need to address that at this time. That existing language is okay, and we don't need to advertise that or bring that forward. Just leave it alone.
And we did 4 last time and they all were in A, right? Yeah.
Correct.
And would it be going in order with the A ones that you have those front loaded there, or would you like to skip around to the ones that might be easiest to knock out, or you just want to go right in numerical order?
We just plow through them in numerical order.
That's good to me.
That's fine.
So we've done the first 4.
Yeah,
So if I could ask you to
Arnie,
flip,
Oh, one second.
just
Sorry.
sorry, I did have one question. Are we going to consider to amend the zoning for South Lexington, the planned unit development zoning? Remember, it got pushed, the drawings showed it going down Maple Ave, the middle.
those are 2 separate items. I'm still trying to get a response out of our attorney. So there were 2 things that I placed on his desk. Now I think I can go forward with the map amendment on my own.
Okay.
I was trying to put that together with our subdivision ordinance to make that less onerous on an applicant, because those are ministerial. They don't need to go all the way to council. So I'm still waiting on an answer so yes, those 2 things will still occur. I have those on a separate
Okay.
timeline than this, but it is possible that we could fold the map amendment into this, even though that map amendment is a comp plan amendment. So maybe we'll advertise that separately.
Yeah.
It's a comp plan amendment. It's not a zoning text amendment.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I think we've talked about that's an important one and not that controversial.
Right.
So,
Indeed.
Okay, great. Thanks, Arnie. Go ahead.
Okay. If we could flip over to page 40 of the packet. And then item number 5, home occupations. And one thing that was pointed out to me is maybe that I assume that everybody knows things that maybe I shouldn't make the assumption. So home occupation, the first one. What is a home occupation? A home occupation is a business that is allowed in a residential area, and there are use and design standards for those. So let's say one of you wants to write a book or has written a book, and all of a sudden you're going to get your royalty check and they need your address, and you go, I don't have, your home address you don't have a business license for. So you come in for a business license for your home address, and then they send up to me from the Commissioner of Revenue's office. Some of you may have done this already, but then they send up to me a zoning approval form. It's on a hot pink sheet, so I can't lose it. So we call it the pink sheet. So I call the person up and say, what are you proposing to do? And then they tell me, and I say, yes, that's not allowed or not allowed. And every single time that I talk to them, I read through these use and design standards. So on the bottom of page 40, I will tell them, yes, that is a home occupation. It is allowed as long as you can meet the following criteria. And I read to them, and no sign shall be permitted. And they say, yes, I'm not going to have a sign.
Mhm.
The area devoted to home occupation shall not exceed 25% of the gross floor area of the dwelling unit, and so on. So then when they say they can meet all those, I sign off on my part of the form. And if they're going to have people come over, now a writer is not going to have somebody come over, but if they have an office, let's say they are an accountant and they do have people come over, there's an expectation on the member of the public who's going to a place that has a business license issued by the city that there should be some life safety measures there. So Steve Pauk will go out, our building official, and do a quick life safety inspection, make sure smoke detectors work, that kind of thing. Not ADA ramps and all that, but just basic life safety measures. He signs off on his part of the form. We hand it back downstairs to the Commissioner of Revenue, and they do whatever it is that they do to finalize the business license. So that in a nutshell is just what a home occupation is. We have a lot of home occupations. We probably do 1 or 2 a week, I would say, at least.
Oh, really?
And sometimes they're also renewals. Somebody's moving from one store, one location, because the business license is for that location. If they move from that location to another, then we have to redo it. But we do have quite a number of home occupations in the city. Any questions on home occupations?
I would be curious. What would not be a permitted home occupation? I mean, could you be a hairdresser?
You can.
Yeah.
But here's the weird part. You could be a hairdresser because also in the definition, which I didn't provide you, it says, and there's an A and a B, and R1, it's an A. So you can have up to 5 people at your house. And I can't remember what the time period is, in an hour or a day. So you can have that type of service as long as it's fairly low impact. Maybe you only have 1 chair and not 2. But the other thing it says in letter D, no merchandise shall be sold on the premises. So you can do hair, but you can't sell shampoo.
Okay.
So there are some fairly
Piano
stringent
teachers. Yeah.
standards
Yeah.
for home occupations. Again, they're meant to allow you to do something in your house up to 25% of the floor area, no retail sales, no sign on the property. So those are the things that we currently have for home occupations as far as use and design standards.
But you can do like Avon or whatever that model is where somebody orders and you deliver. Is that selling merchandise on the premises?
The thing that you can do is like a trunk show, where, well, I'll say this, it depends. A lot of folks all of their sales will be online. So they aren't selling directly from their house. So you're ordering out a catalog and they get shipped directly from wherever it is in the warehouse to your house, the person purchasing the product, then it's not a sale. But I cannot sell T-shirts out of my house to people coming in because it's just going to create too much traffic. So that's going to be a problem for the neighborhood in a residential area. One issue that I noticed with one particular property that we have been trying to clean up for quite a long time is this idea that there shall be no outdoor storage. And this is the only item I think that I have where I'm trying to show you previous language. So prior to the 27 update, we actually had a letter G in for the list of use and design standards for home occupation that said the business shall not use more than 25% of the total floor area of the residence and accessory structures. And there was a second sentence tacked on, and it's highlighted here. There shall be no outdoor storage. Somehow in the update in 2017, we lost that specifically. Now I'm going to ask you to look down to letter C, which is now the new proposed D. That one says the use shall be conducted as an accessory use and shall not change the character of the dwelling unit nor have any exterior evidence of its use. You would think that would be sufficient, but I've had people argue with me that the stuff in the yard isn't changing the character of the dwelling unit, the structure itself. So therefore, the stuff that's in the yard doesn't violate old C, new D. I would prefer, because it's in black and white and it's really clear, if we could add back in, because again, we had it before, the sentence, there shall be no outdoor storage.
Is that even clear enough?
I hope
Not even
so.
clear enough. I mean,
Yeah.
does that mean that you can't have things piled up on your back porch? Or does it mean you can't have a shed to put stuff in?
Accessory dwelling or accessory, not dwelling, sorry, got that in my head. Accessory structure you can use. Where is it? Is it in the definition? Sorry. Should probably put the definition in for you. Home occupation class A, an occupation conducted primarily on site involving persons residing on the premises. Such occupations may require the use of accessory structures. No more than 5 clients or customers shall be allowed on the premises at any time on a regular basis. So accessory structures can be utilized.
They can
Well,
hide everything in.
You can hide, yeah, and so, and that would fulfill, nor have any exterior evidence of its use, which you would have thought would cover no exterior, no outdoor storage. But I guess you can have your own junk out there, I mean, they're piling up or like it, say my house. And so, but just it can't look like your merchandise for whatever. So,
If you're a
But-
plumbing supply, or
Yeah.
if you're a plumber and all of a sudden you have a rack of irrigation pipe laying outside, no. If it's inside the garage or the accessory structure, fine.
Sounds like an A. Is that an A?
yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Maybe, I think it's still confusing there that there shall be no outdoor storage to be visible versus,
I think almost our lots are so small, it's not like we have a 2-acre lot or something so big that you're not going to see it. Maybe from the road or maybe from a existing property. I think you're going to see it in our community in most cases.
What if it said something like there shall be no outdoor storage of business related items?
But home
Of the home occupation.
occupation related items.
Yeah. Then it's pretty clear. Like you said, no irrigation pipes, for example.
yeah.
Is that a good amendment?
Yeah,
Should we know outdoor storage of home occupation related items?
There you go.
that's good.
Okay.
So between that's new C and the old C, that should, no exterior evidence, that should do it. Okay. So we want to recommend proposing that. Okay. The batch of ones, it should be fairly quick. Okay,
Don't have to take votes on this, but general head nod, everybody
Yeah.
okay with that?
yeah,
Okay, awesome. Okay, going over to item 6, where we're going to talk a little bit about signage. This is a copy and paste. I'm not recommending that you add any new regulations to the sign rules and regulations for the C1 and C2 zoning district. I'm not asking you to delete anything. I'm asking you just to clarify or make it a little bit more apparent. And by copying language that's already there and pasting it into the table so it's readily apparent. So in the C1 and C2, and I'm going to read from the highlighted portion for C1, and again, I'm on page 42. So any business within a C1 zoning district shall be limited to displaying no greater than 1 square foot of signage per foot of business frontage, and in no case shall any business display greater than 30 square feet of signage per building street front. What I've noticed happens quite frequently is in Wendy's or whoever's working for Wendy's comes in and they find the C1, or in their case, the C2 zoning district sign table. They only focus on the table. They do not read that paragraph on top that gives you the maximum in that calculation. So they're just not seeing it. So what I would propose that you do is you copy that language and you paste it into a new section at the bottom of those 2 tables. Again, not getting rid of it. It's just in there now twice.
It's a good idea.
that sounds good to everybody?
Yeah.
Within them,
Uh-huh.
okay. All righty,
All right. General, okay with batch A?
yes,
Yes.
okay, we're cooking with gas, let's keep going.
Number 7 is just a little bit of a word change. We've gotten caught up before between, I can't remember, accessory accessory apartment and or I can't remember. In this case, we have in the use matrix a use called industrial comma light, but in the definitions, we have industry comma light. Just for really clarifying that language, I would recommend that you change one or the other so that they match, and that don't really care which one it is necessarily.
Is there an industry heavy or is there, which one,
No,
is there
we
one
don't
that makes
have-
more sense or?
I'm very familiar in past ordinances with light industrial.
Go with industrial light.
That's great.
Okay.
All right, that will be put into batch A. Again, a fairly straightforward change. Item number 8 is about bed and breakfasts. If we go down to letter O, so maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but bed and breakfasts, we are only allow them on 3 streets, and we only allow them with a conditional use permit. So this is an item that's more than a short-term rental. It's a bed and breakfast. There, it's a bigger operation, commercial in a residential area. Therefore, it's a conditional use permit, and we have a number of use and design standards that go along with that. And item O, bed and breakfast establishments must be occupied by the owner. The reason I'm bringing this one up to you for your consideration is Stonegate, which was the bed and breakfast that had been revitalized and came in for a conditional use permit at the corner of South Main and Sellers. It appeared to be a big, older, historic house with an accessory building behind it, which had a 3-car garage and living space above. The folks that purchased that were able to have a conditional use permit approved for that. But that accessory building where they would live above in the accessory unit is actually on a separate parcel. You wouldn't really think it by looking at it. You could just think that's an accessory to the main building, but it ended up being a separate parcel. So for your consideration, would you like to expand the requirement that the owner be on the property, or alternatively, that they may also live on an immediately adjacent parcel with at least 50 feet of adjacency to the parcel containing the bed and breakfast? Mind you, that 50 feet is just something that I made up. It could be more, it could be less. I just would prefer that you have some sort of adjacency as opposed to maybe a parcel that's just barely touching. So some minimum amount of adjacency.
Yeah. So it was this, I looked on GIS and it didn't look like a separate parcel, but it is a separate
Well,
parcel.
I'm going from memory, but
Okay.
even if it's not, we've had this in at least in 2 other instances. The one on South Main in Houston, Abigail Inn, there was an inquiry at one point, could they purchase the house behind them and use the rooms that they're currently living in to expand their bed and breakfast? Now, they haven't done that,
Right.
but that's another example of the intent of having the owner of the operation live there is about control, clearly. So you want somebody who's operating a business in a residential area to be responsive to any issues that are occurring. So living in the unit certainly accomplishes that. But the question is, if they lived immediately adjacent, is that also good enough?
Can we say that they have to, that has to be, they have to occupy it while it's being rented? Kind of add.
Yeah, we could
caveat.
clarify.
And is that already in there? If you are living inside it, is that like that you have to, is that in there already? Like,
What's it? I think so.
then that you, then,
It's,
I think it's maybe just assumed if you're occupying the bed and breakfast that you're there
when they're,
every night that it's being rented.
Right.
But that
because
could
who's
be,
making the breakfast?
Yeah.
and I'm not the breakfast police. But yeah, if you wanted to further state that they have to be either in the main or in the adjacent while any rentals occur, you could
Mhm.
certainly clarify that if you feel it's needed.
Now, suppose they vacated the property line, and they made those,
Boundary line vacation.
what do we have to, does this cover, they can be in a separate accessory structure that's on the same lot, but not attached to the building? Because I think I kind of forgot that it was a separate parcel. And we were just concerned about, do they have to literally be in the building or is that on the same property, So do we have to put that in there?
That's not a bad suggestion, because another example would be Abigail Inn. They also considered not buying the house behind them, but putting in a garage apartment where they would live on top. So they would not be within the bed and breakfast establishment itself, but they would be on the property.
And if we're going to allow this, we're going to allow that, right? I mean, it doesn't, then the question of adjacency doesn't matter because they're on the same parcel. So we want to somehow word it that you can be in an accessory structure living outside of the main. Right? Does that make
Gotta
sense?
take a stab at that. So in the red lettered item, I'm gonna read O, the modified version, bed and breakfast establishments. Oh, the owner of a bed and breakfast establishment must reside on the property, or alternatively, the owner may also live in an immediately adjacent parcel with at least 50 feet of adjacency on the parcel containing the bed and breakfast.
And
Whenever there are guests on property, whenever there are guests staying on property, how about that?
And is it necessary to say that only one of the buildings can be used as the bed and breakfast? You don't get to then expand it into both buildings?
I don't think so, because the conditional use permit is ultimately going to have the condition of how many bedrooms. So that would be sort of ferreted out at that point.
Yeah.
So as an example, once we went from Abigail and went from 6 bedrooms to 7 bedrooms. So they had to come back before you all and council for that update.
Now, did we change, what about the language about an accessory dwelling on the same?
Well, the on the property, I think, covered that accessory portion.
Yeah, that was,
I mean, say, what will it say again then?
I didn't catch that.
Bed and breakfast
The owner of a bed
of,
and
oh, the
breakfast
owner.
must be occupied, must reside on the property. And then
On the property?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And then we pick up with the rest of it, or alternatively, and then at the very end, whenever the guests are on the property.
But do we have to specify that on the property means also in an accessory dwelling if they want, or, okay,
I don't think so. I think that covers on the
Yeah.
property or on the parcel.
okay, all right. Does that work for
Yeah.
folks? Is it clear? Everyone, okay,
All right, we will add that to
Yeah,
batch
thanks.
A. Number 9 is about townhouses. I'm gonna read currently any townhouses in the highlighted portion, any townhouse shall front on or be accessed by a public street. And the reason I'm asking you whether or not a townhouse should be allowed on a private street is we had the instance of the Spotswood Collaborative, that group that had 3 different versions of a proposal for the Spotswood property. They had single family, they had townhouse, and they had multifamily. But I had to point out to them in my review of their proposals that we don't currently allow townhouses on anything but a public street. So would it be the worst thing in the world to also allow townhouses on a private street or on a driveway, as long as it meets all the other requirements for life safety, for fire truck access, and all those things that we have standards for? Is that something that we could allow? Part of the problem with requiring the public street, the Spotswood property, I think, was somewhere in the acreage of like 2.3, but I can't remember at that point if we had the whole property that thing got smaller or not, but that's it's a detail. So if you required them, if they wanted to put townhouses and city council approved townhouses and they had to put in a public street, we go by VDOT standards. So it's a 50-foot right of way, minimum road right of way for a VDOT road. And there's a 30-foot wide pavement. That's a lot of pavement and that's a lot of dead space for a road that's only going to go to townhouses, and it's really not going to connect into anything else or the next development, because we're not growing, we're not expanding, we don't have greenfield. So can we allow townhouses not just on a public street, but possibly also on a private street?
and we allow regular houses on a private street without any other conditions?
Right now, we also have the limitation that each lot shall front on a public street.
Okay, so we don't allow it for houses right now.
That was one of the remaining things in our comp plan that sort of about housing, increasing the number of housing units that we have, presumably for affordability, was to look into what they call a family subdivision, where if you have, as an example, a longer, deeper lot, and this came up because we have a number of longer, deeper lots along Thornhill Drive when you're heading out of town, and you have a house further up front, and the counties do this a lot in that you can subdivide once for a member of the family or to sell off and have that along a driveway and not along a full-blown public road. So that was another thing that is on our plate to consider, is this family subdivision is how some folks call it. So you could get an extra unit on a drive as opposed to having access to a public street. But to be clear, that's not what we're talking about here. This is strictly for townhouses.
There's still regulations for being able to bring a fire truck in, for example.
Correct.
There's still, that would still have to be observed though.
As an example, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, Weatherburn, I think, is a 19-foot wide section of pavement. It's a one-way street, so therefore it can be a little bit narrower. And I don't think we're going to get smaller than that, because if I remember Trent Roberts, our fire marshal, telling me correctly that the outriggers on whatever the biggest piece of equipment have to land on 20 feet. But there's really no need for a 30-foot wide section of pavement. In my opinion, that's sort of a waste of resources and environmentally perhaps not the best solution. So, and if there are more questions, I can certainly get answers to that if I don't have them for you tonight, about other design standards that may help support this proposal.
Yeah, I guess my only other question would be, it says townhouses are by right and RM, RLC and C1. If it's a private road, is that still okay to be by right, or do we need to have the ability to work out the trash pickup and things like that?
So if we do go on a private road, does it make much difference to you which of those zoning districts you're trying to parse out the zoning districts?
Yeah, really, it doesn't seem to bother me at all to make it private. I'm just wondering, do we have to, as a city, do they want to have some, will they still get a point where they can give input on the issues of like trash pickup now on a private road? And
Yes, at the site plan process, because site plans are not required for one family and two family, and that's a single family and a duplex. So once we get to townhouses, they're going through a site plan process. So during the site plan process, Public Works can say we have to get a truck down there of whatever size. So they do have standards for those.
right, and that also get to what you were talking about with fire department, you'd review it at that stage. Okay, well, sounds good.
Arnie, what about, when you're having a private road, what happens with utility connections? What's the,
As an example, in Weatherburn, I'm not sure we always want to use that example, but we do have easements for our water and sewer lines that are within the Weatherburn development. So let's say something happens with one of the water lines, we have the right, because we have the easement, to go in there and fix that. I think the easement's also written in such a way that we don't have to fix the blacktop back on top of it. That's the homeowners association. So through easements, we can handle that. We're not going to get a lot of townhouses either.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
just to be honest.
Alright.
What property is around that we could put
Yeah.
townhouses on in downtown? Or, you know?
If somebody, by right, if somebody wanted to do something in the C2 zoning district, we actually did have somebody a number of years ago, mind you. I haven't been here all that long. The property behind the sheets,
Mhm.
we had somebody looking at that for townhouses at one
Oh.
point. And this is years ago, so that's gone away, but just as an example, there would be a conditional use permit in that zoning district, but that's one of those sort of leftover forgotten little parcels that may actually not be the best for retail, but could be good spot for multifamily of some sort.
Mhm.
Okay, are we good with this in batch A?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Arnie.
that basket's getting.
The big basket.
Yeah.
All righty. Item number 10.
Oh, this one's gonna be fun. This is a sort of a two-part item. And I'm really, I struggle a little bit because of the way the regulation is written. So currently in the off-street parking section, which is Article 12 of our zoning ordinance for off-street parking and loading requirements, we do have an allowance. So it says in C, and I'm reading from the middle of the page, I'm going to read into that highlighted portion. The parking spaces required shall be located on the same lot as the principal use. Makes pretty good sense. Except for in C1 downtown, the city provides parking on street and in parking lots, so we don't really have to consider the downtown C1 zoning district too much. But it does say provided, however, and this is a marvelous sentence, that upon the recommendation of the planning commission and made part of a conditional use permit. So somebody can ask for a conditional use permit to put a portion of the required off-street parking for uses in districts other than residential. Those may be located in a remote parking lot, which is within 500 feet measured along lines of public access from the principal use. So let's say one of you has a restaurant. Oh, Wendy's comes in the C2 zoning district. They are required to have 40 parking spaces, but they can only fit in 20 on their lot. So they can find a remote parking lot that's within 500 feet of where they are and go through the conditional use permit process and maybe get an allowance to put those 20 other required parking spaces on that remote lot that is again within 500 feet of where they are. I've had a couple of instances where folks are trying to put this remote parking lot in a residential zoning district. So the main thing here is I would like to clarify that this remote parking lot has to be on a commercial parcel. And I think I put in either zone C1, C2, or RLC. RLC is up to you. You know, that's, I think C1 and C2 certainly, but it's up to you to decide whether or not RLC is appropriate for a remote parking lot. So that's the first part of it, and I'd rather answer questions now on that part before we get into the next part.
And in short-term rental, where we make that accommodation, is it written separately? It doesn't reference this, does it?
No,
It's
just, so
separately.
I'm thinking about the one instance, that we have it as an example, but you mean in the short-term rental parking,
Yeah.
requirements? No, I
think
don't
that-
think it does.
I think it's written all in there. So it gives options.
I think it just says what the requirement is, or it makes a reference to section 12. It'll take me a minute to find. Off-street parking, again, this is for short-term rental, shall be provided in compliance with Article 12 of this chapter. The physical and aesthetic impact of required off-street parking shall not be detrimental to the existing character of the house or lot or to the surrounding neighborhood. Then there's that weird little conditional use permit that we allow for some parking if it mars the streetscape and that type of thing.
Yeah.
This is just a reference to,
Right, but I thought we allowed on short-term rental. You could find remote parking.
okay, and
Is-
getting into that, that's the one standard. And then the next standard is about that conditional use permit that says off-street parking may, upon recommendation of the planning commission and made part of conditional use permit by the city council, not be required or may be reduced in number for short-term rentals located in R1, R2, RM, and RLC, provided that A, B, and C occur. You want me to read A, B, and C?
Well, does it say anything about the 500 feet? Because
It does.
it does
The
in
first
there.
one.
Okay, as
A.
long as it's specified in there and it doesn't reference this, that's what I was trying to get
But
at.
even here, it doesn't say where the zoning district. So that's like another wrinkle in the sense that in RLs, in short-term rental in a residential zoning district, we allow it, but it doesn't specify what zoning district. So I presume if the short-term rental is in a residential zoning district, you're also okay with the remote parking lot being within, sorry, not just within 500 feet, but also in a residential zoning district.
Yeah, I guess we were looking at it more on short-term rent. The only time it came up was for short-term rentals in RLC or near the downtown area where the remote parking would actually be downtown. 'Cause I don't know if any parking lots in R1, R2, and you don't really want any parking lots in R1, R2.
Yeah,
So as long as, I was just,
yeah, no, it's good.
but it is written separately there. It doesn't
is,
reference it, so we can
Yeah, it's
change
good, right,
this.
yeah.
Don't know if that was confusing or not. But the question I guess still in front of you is if you are a non-residential use, I'm a restaurant, I can't provide all my parking on the site. I can provide it within 500 feet, but do we want that within 500 feet to only be on a property that is zoned commercial as opposed to being a residential district? I don't think we would want to have that impact on residential districts that you're all of a sudden beside a parking lot for the Wendy's that's 400 feet down the street.
And I agree, Arnie. It should be related to the use. The uses should be the same.
Do you care if it's just limited to zone, the remote parking can be located on a parcel that is zoned C1, C2? But what about RLC? Is that getting too far as the breakdown? And RLC is that sort of district that is the buffer between single family R1 and R2 zoning districts and the commercial zoning districts, be it downtown or be it the commercial districts that are running out East Nelson or South Main.
Are you? I'm hesitant about RLC.
We can leave it in for now, and then that decision can be made through the public hearing process. I just didn't know if you wanted to cut it now before we even got to the public hearing process.
I'd like the idea of cutting it now. I don't know how others feel, but
I think I'm comfortable with cutting it. I'm trying to think of where, in RLC, it might be appropriate, but you don't want to lose the residential part of
Right.
RLC to parking.
Right. RLC, we have a good bit of that, let's say down McLaughlin Street, but we really don't have commercial that's going to be within 500 feet that could then access parking in the RLC along McLaughlin. So that's maybe not a good example.
well, it might be.
If they turn that old hardware store.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if they could
Yeah.
fit a commercial use in that's allowed in the RLC, so more limited commercial use in there, then yeah, actually that is a decent example.
Yeah, I think C1 and C2 makes sense. I wouldn't be averse to removing RLC, but it's a great.
Yeah. Do we agree with that? We seem to,
And the benefit to, if we cut it now, then we don't have to have, that's not part of the advertisement, and therefore you can't then add it to the RLC
Yeah.
unless you re-advertise, but at least then you're not having that extra discussion about that zoning district. It'll just limit it a little bit.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're gonna cut RLC out.
Are you on option A at this time?
I guess, ma'am,
Thank
I
you.
am. And then the second part of it gets into a little bit more of word usage in the sense that we have something called a parking facility. So in the highlighted portion, I underlined remote parking lot on purpose. So you, in that language where you have the ability to provide parking somewhere else as long as it's within 500 feet, but that's in a remote parking lot, which isn't a defined thing. But we do, by the way, have something defined called a parking facility. And a parking facility, the use and design standards have a couple of design standards that go with it, and those are listed there in the bottom. So a parking facility, the following general standards shall apply to all parking facilities. No motor vehicle work shall be permitted in association with a parking facility except under emergency service work. B, parking shall be the principal use of all parking facilities. Spaces may be rented for parking, but no other business of any kind shall be conducted in the structure except city-sanctioned farmers markets. And then there's the definition of what a parking facility is at the bottom. The reason I bring this up is, do we want, and I'm not sure that we do, but for your consideration, do you want to change the language in C from remote parking lot to remote parking facility then you automatically get the use and design standards that go along with it in addition to the definition. The downside of that is maybe more restrictive than what you want to do. An example of perhaps where it's more restrictive, again, I'm going to go along McLaughlin Street, Old Lexington Hardware or Building Supply property. Let's say they get an IRF grant, Industrial Revitalization Fund grant, where you have to have at least 30% of your building commercial use and the rest can be residential. They figure out how to put a commercial use in the lower portion, and then they have residences above, apartments, but they don't have enough parking on site. So they go down to Mez's property and say, hey, can we lease or rent out 5 parking spaces to make up the amount that we have? This says that in B, that the parking shall be the principal use and there shall no other business of any kind shall be conducted in the structure except city. So this may actually be a little bit too limiting because Mez isn't going to all of a sudden not do his timber frame business there. He's going to just not rent out those 5 parking spaces. So I was thinking at first, just trying to tie this remote parking lot that is in an item C that we've already talked about to perhaps tying that to something that we already have use and design standards and a definition for. But again, the downside is it may be too restrictive.
And this would be for conditional use in any case, right? So we could sort of retain flexibility by not adding that second part, but address on a case by case basis. My understanding correctly?
Yeah, correct.
That's a good
So
point.
that's why have given you option A and option B. Again, I think we need to do at least option A, and maybe option B is a little bit too much, but it is still for your consideration. Do we want to go ahead and tie that remote parking lot to a remote parking facility to gain those extra design standards and extra language in the definition? And we also don't have to vote on something tonight. You can consider it and we can come back to it at a later date if you like.
Parking facility does have its definition there, but in the situation where you're talking about additional remote parking, I think a lot is a good way to look at that.
It's good enough.
conceptually.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it sounds like option A
Yeah.
and taking out RLC, and that goes into batch A.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That was my favorite one. This is going to be the best one yet.
Yeah.
There's
I don't know what it is you're talking about here, so.
Half story.
Oh, this one. Oh, I thought you meant the last one.
No, this one's.
Half story. We have addition of story, comma, half, a space under a sloping roof which has the line of intersection of roof decking and wall face not more than 3 feet above the top floor level, and in which space not more than 2/3 of the floor area and the ceiling next above it. Now, remember when we were talking about accessory dwelling units and we're going to have 25 feet as the maximum height and 1.5 stories is where we started, but we ended up saying, no, this half story thing is not needed. We just went to 2 stories. But that brought up the definition that we have for half story. So the intersection of the roof deck where it hits the wall, which is what I call a pony wall or a knee wall, and then you have the floor. So if you only have a 3-foot high knee wall, that's kind of dead space. So the recommendation is to at least go to a 5-foot wall. And if I remember correctly, that's the definition that Buena Vista has for a half story. I think that would be fairly straightforward. The second half of that sentence, I don't know what that means. And therefore I would recommend, unless somebody can explain it to me, I would recommend we get rid of it because in which space not more than 2/3 of the floor area and the ceiling next above it. And I don't know if we just didn't pull from someplace and pull the entire thought or what the issue is there, but I don't know how to explain that to anybody.
That sounds good if you understand on the 5 feet.
Missing a verb or something.
Yeah.
Now, we can stay here until we figure it out. It's lovely.
I don't even understand the first half of the sentence.
That's, I was still working on the first part too.
Now for that, the sloping roof intersects with the roof decking intercepts with the wall. It's not more than 3 feet above the top of the floor.
Okay.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Diagram might have actually
No.
helped here a little thing. But I would have, because a 3-foot knee wall, you can't get any into it. You can't really use, so why not at least make it 5 for a little bit more head height and usability?
Yeah.
And again, that matches up at least with BV's definition.
And a story is usually 10 feet, isn't it?
Roughly, if you think about how many stories or how many floors can get in a story, you normally think about 10 feet.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about not just the 8 foot of living space, but 2 foot of structure and whatever else.
I think Lee recommended that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
true. When we had public comment for ADU. So generally accepting
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
add bump 3 to 5 and get rid of the second half of that.
Yes.
Yes.
Put that in batch A.
All right. You think we can make it through 12 in 9 minutes, or is this one tricky?
Let's give it a whirl.
Okay.
I also don't have a zoning report because I forgot, so that might save us.
Okay.
Okay, concessions are not specifically allowed in a public park. Brew Breaker, I'm gonna screw that up. The sports complex over on Brubaker, it contains a concession stand, and there's no specific provision that allows a concession stand in the public park and recreation area use. That one is non-conforming. They picked back up with it, and I think they're selling stuff out of it again. They asked about that, and as long as they didn't disuse it or not use it for 2 years, then it doesn't go away. So I think they're okay with that use. But I would like to clarify if we can, that concessions, and right now it would be a grandfathered or a non-conforming, a legally non-conforming use. No, they can continue it. They can't expand it in the future. Not that RARO is asking to expand it, but if we can, perhaps we can make that a legal use as opposed to a legal non-conforming use. So I think it would help if we had concessions added to the public parks to explicitly authorize the Brubaker concession stand and possibly to also allow food service in other public parks. And that's sort of a question. Do you want that or do you not want that? We have had public events in Brubaker itself, and I cannot remember the event, but they had 3 or 4
Mhm.
food trucks there. I don't think that hurt anything and didn't hear any negative complaints or any complaints at all. So it's just a question of would you want to consider allowing concessions in the public park and recreational area use?
I'd say yes, but I think it's a B because I think we'll have to take a little time to think about. Because I agree, I think Jordan's point's a opportunity, not just Brubaker, but look at all the parks. But I like we should have concessions.
Yeah, if we're gonna be using the open spaces for more events, then they're gonna need food,
Yeah.
right? But is it the question of, is it the city selling it? Are we kind of giving permission to whatever, or suppose an organization is holding an event, do we somehow just say you can do that, and what limits? I guess you're right about the number of questions that will come up.
And there, for what it's worth, in the Jordan's Point Park Master Plan, all the way on the western end, there is a vendor area sort of listed. Now, there would have to be some improvements such as parking and also electricity and whatnot. That hasn't occurred yet, but there's a vendor area just as an example. And also the gentleman, I think it was Bither Outdoor, who rented the kayaks. I cannot remember how long their contract, if that gets renewed or how, but they did ask about selling food last year. They didn't do it because of some of the food service requirements and they weren't quite ready and they just started renting the kayaks last year. But they did ask about food service as well. So that's why it's being brought up. So the first question, again, should concessions be allowed in the public park and recreational area use? And it sounds like maybe, but it sounds like it's a batch B for a little bit more discussion and maybe development of use and design standards, possibly.
I like Leslie's suggestion, yes.
Yeah.
I would go.
Is the concession is there one at Brubaker that's sort of a permanent building? There is, okay.
a green one by,
So I think we need to distinguish also between like a permanent building and then those food trucks that come in for special occasions or
Right.
special events.
right, yeah,
We're not holding anything up because again, they're grandfathers. So whenever they pick up with whatever the spring sports are over there.
Mhm.
Lacrosse, well, so they can use there. So we're not holding them up with a decision.
Right.
So going to a B is not an issue, I guess is
Right.
my point. So it sounds like
yeah.
this
if that's
entire
the-
discussion in number 12.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the second part, but I don't think we need to if we're going to put this into batch B.
Right,
And then the pool, well, I guess we can just talk about it later. I mean, right now, do we allow like the pool to have a concession stand? I know the city owns it, so technically,
It's not specific. I guess that's the point.
we
is-
don't say anything about
Yeah,
concession
so
stands. Yeah, so we
if
don't.
it came before me, I could consider it to be an accessory use and I could give that determination to them, or I could say it's not an accessory use and they could then argue that in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. But if it's something that we
Mhm.
prefer, or just to make explicit that, yes, that is something that they can have, I think it'd be good to put it in the definition or use and design standard.
Sounds good.
I bet we could do 13.
Oh,
Is
ambitious.
that one where we're just putting a
We can do.
Yeah.
word? Is that just putting a word in a matrix?
Okay, 13 is chickens. I realized that we didn't, even though we added chickens, we did
Really?
not add the use into the
In the
matrix. And I thought, oh, this will be easy. But then I looked at how
Oh.
chickens is written. Then I realized, how do I do that in the matrix? So it's got to be a by right use. But then we had to add the note because chickens are allowed in as an accessory to single family, two family, and multifamily dwellings. Well, where do you allow single family, two family, multifamily dwellings? They could be in all the zoning districts, even if it's not explicitly a by right use. Let's say in the floodplain, there could be an older house that's in the floodplain, and are we going to deny them the keeping of chickens, which it doesn't really matter, honestly, if they float away. It's mean, but so therefore the proposal has a whole bunch of Bs, but it does have a note that says,
Got to meet all those requirements.
and I think it's just good practice to have the uses in the use matrix.
Yeah.
And with that, we finish our work with chickens.
Some are more notable successes.
Yes, all right. That's probably where we,
Yeah, let's.
About 9 of them?
yeah, I think the talking about short-term rentals will be a little
Yeah.
bit- always a can of worms. So, that leaves, 2 minutes to open up for public comment. Okay, and seeing none, we will close the public comment. Is there anything else anyone would like to say on this? We kind of did our discussion as Arnie went, but it says here comment, discussion recommendation. We kind of folded that into the staff report, but we're all good with what we've seen and so forth. Okay. Then we will move on to other business, which will not be a zoning and planning report.
I cannot think of anything off the
Okay.
top of my head to add to a zoning and planning report, so no report.
That is fine. We are working on B. And so that would bring us to city council report.
And Kate, I didn't write this out and you don't have to detail this, just write bullet points, but we did meet and we talked about ADUs for about 2 hours. Arnie led us through a great discussion. We spent most of that time talking about short-term rentals for the ADUs. I think what we came up with was planning commission's intention, because it very closely matches our current short-term rental. So for the R1, R2, RM, if you have an ADU, like we said, you can only have one short-term rental on your property. If you're not renting in the building you are staying in, then it's a type B, so it's limited to 45 days. Or if you rent for more than two rooms, again, it's a type B. Otherwise, if you are renting in the dwelling you're in, and it's less than 2 rooms, then it's a type A. So that we spent a lot of time on that, and I think that's where we came out on. Is there anything else?
Utilities.
Yeah, and then on utilities, we talked about finding a compromise. We didn't want the city to lose any of the fees that we were getting, but a lot of the fees, when you add a water line, just cover costs. But there is one, a system connection, it's not,
System development.
that's what,
charge.
a system development charge. It's about $1,200. We're going to require that everybody pay that. And then, there's a minimum monthly water usage fee of $40, and you will get charged for the $40 for your dwelling, whether or not you hook up a separate meter or not. But you'll still end up paying those fees so that the city's not losing any revenue from that. And then one council member it's pretty set on they would like to see the maximum occupancy set at 2 people per bedroom. And we don't limit bedrooms in the ADU. So we'll see how that goes on. We're going to have a public hearing on this on February 1st. We'll see how that goes. But our meeting packet will be out tomorrow. So if you want to look to see what we've got for the few changes we've made with the short-term rentals or the water, the utilities, and I think those are the only 2 that are going to show up. Read over it. If you have any concerns, if you'll let me know, or just show up to the meeting on Thursday.
What, Leslie, what was the decision, or has there been a decision on the separate meters?
Yeah, so we gave the option of doing either, but you have to pay that $1,200 fee right up front. It's a one-time fee. And then you'll be, if you don't get a meter, $40 will be added to your bill, basically to take care of the minimum water usage for the ADU. So and if you did decide to meter it separately, the total cost ends up being about $6,000.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
So there is still a savings and that only applies to a detached ADU.
And the audio is also available for that 2-hour work session if you're so inclined.
Okay.
It's like-
All right. Well,
Herding cats with Arnie trying to keep us on topic because
sorry for leaving all of those details to city council. We thought we had it tied up pretty well here, but
yeah, well, I think we came out to the
Wrong.
same spot,
Yeah.
place that
we would have gotten there if we had thought of all of it.
right.
Okay.
And then so at our meeting we met last Thursday, and we had an excellent report from Pat Bradley on behalf of the Planning Commission, and that we also received our annual reports from the ARB and the Board of Zoning Appeals. And if you'll notice, those are all Arnie's boards, and he also has Threshold, and he's got plenty of other job responsibilities. So it was good to see how busy Arnie has been this past year, and we thank you and Kate for your work.
And for the report that you wrote for us, for me to give credit
Oh,
for.
Give credit for
Yeah.
y'all for the reports.
I'll never be president of Harvard now. Um,
And and then we discussed a draft policy on government speech from city-owned light posts. So our attorney has been looking over that, and we may make a few modifications, in part allowing some different flags. We would specify what flags can be flown, but perhaps including the local schools, our city schools and the county high school, and even the universities. So we will have a public hearing on that draft policy on February 15th. And then also at our next meeting at February 1st, there'll be I guess it's advertised as an official public hearing, but it's really just to get input on the dog park. And the Public Works did mark off the location on McCorkle Street if you want to drive by and see where it's proposed and come February 1st and let us know what you think. That's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Good bit. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And unless you all want to hang around here longer, someone has to say something. Make a motion to adjourn.
May I move that we adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carries.
Thank you all.